Good morning. Well, today I've arrived in the wonderful village of St Briavels, and that falls in both the Wye Valley and the Forest of Dean. Now, St Briavels is another place that I remember very well from childhood. I've even stayed in the youth hostel, which is in the castle behind me. Did that a couple of times when I first joined the Youth Hostels Association. And I always remember the youth hostel here at St Briavels Castle because the male dormitories were in the old castle dungeon. Well, I'm looking forward to today's walk, so it starts and ends here in St Briavels. The lovely village of St Briavels is situated in the Royal Forest of Dean, close to the border with Wales, and 5 miles south of Coleford. It stands almost 800 feet above sea level on the edge of a limestone plateau above the Wye Valley. The general character of the village is typified by a mid-19th century core, complemented to the east by a large number of houses built during the 1970s. Although many residents now no longer work in the area, the village retains a relatively vibrant community. St Briavels is famous for an age-old tradition called the St Briavels Bread and Cheese Dole, which dates back to the 12th century. Each year on Whit Sunday, bread and cheese is thrown from the wall of the castle to local dole claimers dressed in medieval costume. Dole claimers could be anyone who paid a penny to the Earl of Hereford, entitling them to gather firewood from the nearby Hudnalls wood. Some believe in the power of these edible morsels and preserve them for good luck. Miners originally used them as charms to protect against accidents underground. Today, some people choose to place them in matchboxes and rest them under their pillow to inspire dreams of the future. Once known as Ladenia Parva, which means Little Lydney, the village has one pub, the George, as well as a junior school, a church, 2 chapels and a doctor's surgery. It also has a well-regarded village shop and delicatessen called the Pantry, operating from a small building opposite the George. I went inside the pantry and bought some items for my lunch, including a locally made pork pie. The Assembly Rooms has a hall with a stage for entertainment and special events for the local close-knit community. It also has a snooker room and a reading room for hire. The pavilions hold a very popular and well-established monthly local produce and suppliers market, a local farmers market offering a fine selection of organic vegetables, rare breed pedigree pork, award-winning local cheeses, cider, wine, honey, and a range of other delicacies. An annual summer fete, known as the Carnival, attracts large crowds and is usually held on the second Saturday afternoon in June. The village is sheltered behind the crumbling walls of its 12th century moated Norman castle, which was created by Miles of Gloucester in 1131. St Briavels Castle has been a Norman fortress, a royal castle and hunting lodge of King John of England, and was also visited by Henry II, who made the castle the administrative and judicial centre for the Forest of Dean. It has also been a prison, a school and a private house, but today it is a youth hostel. Between the 11th and 13th centuries, the shire counties were split into hundreds. The ancient administrative area of the St Briavels Hundred was created to provide a structure for the administration of the Forest of Dean. The meeting place was St Briavels Castle. St Briavels Hundred is the largest in the Forest of Dean, and its boundaries approximate to the forest boundaries. A forester is a resident natural of the Forest of Dean, born within the St Briavels Hundred. There are still several traditional forester families living and working in the area, keeping the ancient traditions and rites alive. This 11th century building is located opposite St Briavels Castle. St Mary's Church holds up to 170 people and is of mixed architecture dating from Norman to Victorian times. The organ was built to the design of that in Liverpool Cathedral, voiced by the leading voicer of the time and installed by Ernest Bryson, a composer and organist who retired to St Briavels. The tower houses a peal of 8 bells, which are as much appreciated by visiting bell ringers as by the local band. The church is used as a concert venue by Wye Valley Music. My walk would be starting at the castle, from which I would be walking down the road signposted to Lower Mean. Just before I began my journey, however, I walked over to look at the view over the Wye Valley. Well, I've had a nice look around the lovely village of St Briavels, so now it's time I started my walk. Dropping down to the aforementioned road, I immediately forked left along a country lane. After about 400 metres, I took a footpath on the right, which dropped steeply down, partly on rough steps, to cross a lane and then a stream, before contouring well above the valley floor through superb open woodland. Well, I've met up with another route now, and I'm going to follow this for quite some way now. I wonder what route that is. I was reunited with OFFA'S Dyke path. I climbed gently to meet a country lane, and followed OFFA'S Dyke path as it twisted and turned along tiny lanes and tracks, which are characteristic of the ancient landscape of the Hudnalls. Formerly a large and well-wooded common used for wood pasture, the Hudnalls was colonised by squatters in the 18th century, and now comprises tiny fields, narrow lanes and tracks. There is a real sense of seclusion in this remarkable compact landscape, where millstones were once quarried and rolled down the hillside to be loaded onto barges on the river below. The route was complex, but very well signposted, as it meandered south across St Briavels Common, with excellent views across the Wye Valley. It was way back in 1985 when I joined the Youth Hostel Association, and the very first hostel I stayed in was St Briavels. Now, I did a walk along OFFA'S Dyke path as far as St Briavels. I walked from Chepstow, so from Chepstow I walked to Tintern, I think it was, and then I had a couple of drinks in one of the pubs there, a couple of ciders, and then as I passed Brockwere and climbed up the Hudnalls along this part of OFFA'S Dyke path where I am now, I sat on a wall somewhere. I think it was further down the hill somewhere, closer to Brockwere where I'm standing now. But I remember sitting on that wall feeling quite lightheaded after my ciders. But I thought, wow, what a wonderful feeling. It was just lovely as I sat there and looked into the valley. And I thought, yeah, this is the life. Happy memories. Anyway, this is actually where I leave OFFA'S Dyke path now. I'm going to be following lanes and more tracks up towards Hewelsfield. Leaving OFFA'S Dyke path, I walked through woodland into the hamlet of Triangle, where I stopped for my lunch. Incidentally, the pork pie I'd bought from the pantry was really tasty. Continuing on, I turned left, briefly following a quite busy road, until veering right onto a restricted byway. This was a surfaced lane as far as Yew Tree Cottage. However, where the lane suddenly changed into a narrow path climbing between hedges, I came across a slight problem. Wow, what a view, eh? I've actually had to come off that byway because it was just so overgrown. That's the byway just at the bottom of the field there. That's the hedge that lines the boundary of the byway. Now where those trees are at the bottom, that's where it started to become really overgrown. It was so thick with stinging nettles and brambles. I started to try and cut my way through, but I could see that it was going on and on and on. So all of this stretch basically is overgrown, so thick with brambles you can't get through. So unfortunately, I had to climb over a gate by those trees down there and walk along the edge of this field because I just wouldn't have got through. So apologies to the landowner, but needs must, unfortunately. Anyway, on to Hewelsfield now. I climbed on up as I rejoined the road. At the top, I crossed the B4228, walking along the lane opposite to reach the village of Hewelsfield. This area was known in the Anglo-Saxon period as High Wold Stone. It was included by William the Conqueror in the Royal Forest of Dean, but by the 12th century was established as a village with church. Ancient routes running up from the River Severn at Alvington and Wollaston met at Hewelsfield village and continued to St Briavels. In 1266, the manor of Hewelsfield was granted to Tintern Abbey, which retained it until the dissolution in 1536. Together with the Abbey Grange at Brockwere, the manor was then granted to Henry Somerset, 2nd Earl of Worcester. Hewelsfield is a classic example of a shrunken village with low earthworks in several fields, revealing the sites of streets, houses and medieval field systems. Hewelsfield Church is one of the ancient churches of the Forest Fringe. Saxon in origin, it has a squat tower, a hermit's room in the entrance porch, and a steeply sloping nave roof, which almost reaches the ground. The east window is almost 100 years old and was designed by the highly respected George Daniels, whose work can be located in many churches and cathedrals around the world. The squat tower has a peal of 6 bells, one dated 1450, being the oldest ringable bell in the Forest of Dean. Well, I have to admit, I'm not religious at all. I don't go to church because I'm not a believer. However, I love churches. I think they are some of the most fantastic buildings we have on this planet. They're centrepiece of nearly every village and town. Well, maybe with the exception of the pubs. But no, seriously, I think churches are wonderful buildings. Just wonderful pieces of architecture, and Hewelsfield Church is no exception. Lovely little village Hewelsfield is. Very small, but quiet and isolated, but the church just dominates this lovely little village. Well, it's now time for me to head back to St Briavels. I took the wide footpath running roughly northwards past Hewelsfield Court, a major estate by the 16th century. This straight track once formed part of the ancient route from Wollaston to St Briavels. Eventually, I continued along a lane which led back into St Briavels. I crossed the main road and descended gently to return to the heart of the village. I had enjoyed another wonderful walk in the Wye Valley and Forest of Dean, with St Briavels being the perfect village from which to start and end my day.